The sound of my wrench clanking against the Jeep's engine block echoed through the garage as I heard Sarah giggling like a schoolgirl on her phone upstairs. At 43, my wife had never been much of a giggler, especially not at 10:30 on a Tuesday night. I wiped the grease off my hands with an old rag and listened closer. "Can't wait to see you in Miami," she whispered into the phone, followed by more of that ridiculous giggling. Miami? Last I checked, her big, important work conference was supposed to be in Boston. But hey, what did I know? I was just the blue-collar husband who kept the lights on while she climbed her corporate ladder at Henderson Associates. I'm Jack Morrison, and up until 6 months ago I thought I had a pretty good life. 20 years married to Sarah, a 17-year-old daughter named Emma who barely tolerated us both, and a decent living running my own electrical contracting business. Then Sarah got her promotion to senior marketing coordinator, and suddenly our little New England town wasn't good enough for her anymore. The next morning, I decided to surprise Sarah at her fancy new office. The Henderson building was the only modern high-rise in our town of Millbrook, all glass and steel sticking out like a sore thumb among the old brick buildings downtown. "Oh, Mr. Morrison," squeaked Janet from HR when I walked into the lobby with coffee and donuts. "Sarah's not here today. She and Mr. Henderson left for their vacation yesterday." Vacation. Not work conference. Vacation. "Must have gotten my wires crossed," I said, forcing a smile. "When did you say they'd be back?" "Friday, I think?" They looked so excited heading off together. Janet leaned in conspiratorially. "Between you and me, nobody here understands what she sees in him. I mean, he's successful and all, but—" She shuddered. "There are things about Richard Henderson that would make your skin crawl." I left the coffee and donuts with Janet and walked back to my truck, mind racing. 20 years of marriage, and Sarah was off playing house with her boss in Miami. The rage building in my chest felt like a furnace firing up. That evening, I stopped by Murphy's Gym, the rundown boxing club where I'd been working out since high school. The owner, Tommy Murphy, was behind the bar cleaning glasses when I walked in. "You look like someone ran over your dog," Tommy said, sliding a beer across the bar. "What's eating you, Jack?" I told him everything. About the Miami trip, about Sarah's lies, about how she'd been working late every night for months. Tommy listened without interrupting, then leaned across the bar. "Jack, you've been coming here for 25 years. I've seen you take punches that would drop most men. Don't tell me you're going to let some suit steal your wife without a fight? What am I supposed to do? Follow them to Miami?" "Nah, but you could start by finding out what Janet meant about Henderson having problems. Information is power, my friend." The next day, I drove back to Henderson and Associates. This time, I wasn't bringing coffee and donuts. I was bringing my electrician's toolkit and a story about checking the building's electrical systems. The security guard, an old-timer named Pete who I'd done work for years ago, waved me through without question. "Good to see you, Jack. Haven't had any problems with the wiring since you upgraded our system." I made my way up to the executive floor where Henderson's corner office sat empty. The door was locked, but I'd installed the electronic lock system myself 2 years ago. Funny how contractors keep master codes for maintenance purposes. Henderson's office was exactly what I expected from a pretentious 40-something bachelor. Expensive furniture, awards on the walls, and a bar cart that probably cost more than my truck. But it was his desk that caught my attention. Sitting right there in plain sight was a manila folder labeled Personal Medical Confidential. Inside were lab results, prescription records, and correspondence with a specialist in Boston. Richard Henderson had contracted a particularly unpleasant, sexually transmitted infection during a business trip to Thailand 6 months ago. The kind that required ongoing treatment and had a nasty habit of spreading to partners. I photographed everything with my phone, then noticed something else that made my blood boil. Sarah's silk scarf, the blue one I'd bought her for our anniversary, was draped over the back of Henderson's leather couch. On my way out, I stopped by Janet's desk. She looked around nervously before sliding a business card across to me. "That's Dr. Patricia Williams at the county health clinic," she whispered. "She's been treating several of our female employees recently. All for the same thing, if you know what I mean." I knew exactly what she meant. That night, I sat in my garage workshop, staring at the photos on my phone. 20 years of marriage, and Sarah was willing to throw it all away for a diseased womanizer who treated his employees like a personal dating service. The old Jack would have confronted her directly, demanded answers, maybe even begged her to come home. But I wasn't the old Jack anymore. I spent the next 2 days preparing. I made copies of Henderson's medical records, researched the specific infection he'd contracted, and learned some very interesting facts about legal notification requirements for sexually transmitted diseases. I also made a few phone calls to old friends in the construction business who owed me favors. Friday evening, Sarah came home with a tan and a guilty smile. "How was Boston?" I asked, not looking up from the sports section. "Oh, you know how these conferences are. Boring presentations, terrible hotel food." She was a terrible liar. Always had been. "I missed you, honey. Did you at least learn something useful? Maybe pick up some new skills?" "Very funny, Jack." She headed upstairs to shower, probably washing off Henderson's cologne. I waited until Saturday morning, when Sarah was having coffee and scrolling through her phone, still glowing from her romantic getaway. "Honey," I said, setting a manila envelope on the kitchen table next to her coffee mug, "I got you a little welcome home present." Sarah looked puzzled as she opened the envelope. I watched her face go from confusion to horror as she realized what she was looking at. "Where did you get this?" she whispered, staring at Henderson's medical records. "Does it matter? What matters is that you need to get yourself tested. Today." The color drained from her face. "Jack, I can explain." "Explain what? How you lied about Boston? How you've been screwing your boss for months? Or how you might have brought home a little souvenir from your romantic getaway?" Sarah started crying, but I felt nothing. 20 years of marriage, and she'd thrown it away for a few nights in Miami with a man who collected sexual partners like trophies. "I made you an appointment at the county health clinic for Monday morning," I said, standing up from the table. "Dr. Williams is expecting you." Our daughter Emma chose that moment to walk into the kitchen, still in her pajamas and looking for breakfast. "Why is Mom crying?" Emma demanded, glaring at me. "What did you do?" "I just gave your mother some important health information from her new job," I said calmly. "Nothing for you to worry about." But Emma wasn't buying it. At 17, she was too smart and too angry at the world to accept simple explanations. "You're being an asshole, Dad. Whatever Mom did, you don't have to be cruel about it." Sarah looked up at me through her tears, mascara running down her cheeks. "Please, Jack, we can work through this." "Can we?" "Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you already made your choice." I left them in the kitchen and went to my workshop. I had phone calls to make and a plan to execute. Sarah wanted to play games? Fine. But she was about to learn that she'd picked the wrong opponent. Monday morning came with a phone call that confirmed my worst fears and best hopes. Sarah had tested positive for Henderson's little gift. She spent the day crying and making frantic phone calls to her doctor, her mother, and probably Henderson himself. I felt nothing but cold satisfaction. That evening, Sarah's best friend and co-worker, Linda Prescott, showed up at our door. Linda was everything Sarah aspired to be, perfectly dressed, perfectly coiffed, and perfectly fake. "Jack, we need to talk," Linda announced, pushing past me into the living room. "About what?" "About what you're doing to Sarah. This whole situation is getting out of hand." I laughed. "Out of hand? Linda, my wife has been cheating on me with her boss, and now she's got an STD to show for it. Seems pretty straightforward to me." Linda's perfectly applied makeup couldn't hide the flush creeping up her neck. Marriages go through rough patches. Sarah made a mistake, but destroying her reputation isn't going to fix anything. Her reputation? What about mine? What about our daughters? Emma doesn't have to know the details. You could handle this quietly, like adults. I studied Linda's face carefully. Something about her tone, her body language, felt off, like she had more invested in this conversation than simple friendship would explain. Tell me, Linda, how long have you known about the affair? Her hesitation told me everything I needed to know. I suspected something might be happening, but you didn't think to mention it to me? It wasn't my place to get involved in your marriage. But it's your place now? Linda stood up, smoothing her skirt. I'm trying to help both of you. Sarah's career is important to her, and Richard, well, Richard has been good to both of us. There it was, the slip I'd been waiting for. Both of us. How good has Richard been to you, Linda? She realized her mistake immediately. I meant the entire marketing team. He's been supportive of all our careers. But I wasn't buying it anymore than Emma had bought my health information excuse. The next day was the annual Millbrook Community BBQ, held every year in Riverside Park. The whole town turned out for it. Families, business owners, local politicians, everyone who was anyone in our little corner of New England. Sarah had been looking forward to it for weeks, planning to show off her new promotion and her Miami tan. She tried to back out that morning, claiming she didn't feel well, but I insisted. Come on, honey. You've been talking about this barbecue for months. Besides, I'm sure Richard will be there. Wouldn't want to disappoint the boss. Sarah's face went pale, but she got dressed and came with me. The park was packed by the time we arrived. I spotted Henderson immediately. Tall, silver-haired, wearing expensive casual clothes that screamed, I make more money than you. He was holding court near the beer tent, surrounded by his usual crowd of admirers and employees. I guided Sarah through the crowd, stopping to chat with neighbors and old friends. Everyone wanted to hear about her promotion, her new responsibilities, her recent business trip. Boston, right? Asked Mrs. Chen from the hardware store. How was the conference? Oh, it was educational, Sarah managed. Actually, I said loudly enough for nearby conversations to pause. Sarah didn't go to Boston. She went to Miami, with her boss. Isn't that right, honey? The conversations around us stopped entirely. Sarah looked like she wanted to disappear into the ground. Jack, please. What? I'm proud of you. Not every employee gets to take personal vacations with the boss. That's quite an achievement. Henderson had noticed the commotion and was making his way over, probably thinking he needed to rescue Sarah from her embarrassing husband. Everything all right here? He asked, flashing his practiced smile. Perfect, I said, extending my hand. You must be Richard. I'm Jack Morrison, Sarah's husband. I wanted to thank you personally for taking such good care of my wife during your trip. Henderson shook my hand warily. It was a business conference, Mr. Morrison. Very routine. In Miami? That's interesting. Sarah told everyone it was in Boston. But then again, Sarah's been telling a lot of interesting stories lately. The crowd around us was growing, sensing drama. In a small town like Millbrook, public confrontations were better than cable television. I think there's been some confusion, Henderson said, still trying to maintain his composure. Oh, there's been confusion, all right, but not about where you went or what you did. The confusion is about what happens next. I pulled out my phone and opened the photos of Henderson's medical records. See, Richard, can I call you Dick? The thing about sexually transmitted infections is that they're a public health concern. There are notification requirements, contact tracing, that sort of thing. Henderson's face went white. You can't what? Can't protect my community from a public health threat? Can't make sure that all of your business partners get proper medical attention? The crowd was hanging on every word now. Sarah was crying quietly beside me, and Henderson looked like he was about to bolt. In fact, I continued, I've already spoken to Dr. Williams at the county health clinic. She's very interested in your recent travel history and your employment practices. That's when Henderson made his mistake. Instead of trying to diffuse the situation, he got angry. "You have no right to access my private medical information," he snarled. "I'll have you arrested for theft." "Theft? I didn't steal anything, Dick. I just happened to find some papers that were carelessly left lying around. Public health documents that, by law, should have been reported to the appropriate authorities weeks ago." The crowd was murmuring now, putting together the pieces of the story. Small-town gossip networks moved faster than the internet, and by tomorrow morning, everyone in Millbrook would know that Richard Henderson had given his married employee a sexually transmitted disease during their romantic getaway. Henderson pushed through the crowd and stormed off toward the parking lot. Sarah tried to follow him, but I caught her arm. "Let him go, honey. You've done enough damage for one day." Emma appeared at my elbow, having witnessed the entire confrontation. "Dad, what the hell was that about?" I looked down at my daughter, this angry, confused teenager who was about to learn some very adult lessons about betrayal and consequences. "Ask your mother," I said. "I'm sure she'll have another interesting story to tell you." That night, Emma cornered me in my workshop. "Mom told me everything," she said, her voice shaking with rage. "About the affair, about getting sick, about you humiliating her in public. And you're both idiots. But at least Mom made a mistake because she was lonely and stupid. You're just being cruel." I set down my wrench and looked at my daughter. She had Sarah's eyes but my stubborn chin, and right now, she looked like she wanted to punch something. "Emma, your mother didn't make a mistake. She made a choice, multiple choices over several months, and those choices have consequences. So you're going to destroy her life? I'm going to make sure she faces the same consequences as everyone else who lies and cheats and puts other people at risk." Emma shook her head. "This isn't you, Dad. The man who raised me wouldn't do this. The man who raised you wouldn't have had to." But her words stung because part of me knew she was right. The old Jack Morrison would have handled this differently. He would have been hurt and angry, but he wouldn't have planned public humiliation and social destruction. The problem was, the old Jack Morrison was gone. Sarah had killed him in a Miami hotel room. Over the next few days, the fallout from the barbecue spread through town like wildfire. Henderson stopped showing up at local business events. Sarah couldn't go to the grocery store without getting stares and whispers. Several other women from Henderson Associates quietly made appointments with Dr. Williams, but it was Linda Prescott's reaction that interested me most. Instead of supporting Sarah through the crisis, she seemed to be distancing herself, avoiding phone calls, canceling lunch dates, making excuses not to get together. I decided it was time to have another conversation with Linda. I found her at the coffee shop downtown, sitting alone with her laptop and looking uncharacteristically frazzled. "Mind if I join you?" I asked, sliding into the seat across from her before she could object. "Jack, I don't think this is appropriate." "Appropriate? Linda, my wife is falling apart, my daughter hates me, and my marriage is over. I think we're past worrying about appropriate." She closed her laptop and studied my face. "What do you want?" "The truth, about how long you've known about Sarah and Henderson, about your role in all of this, about what you're really after." Linda's perfectly composed mask slipped for just a moment, and I saw something calculating underneath. "I don't know what you mean." "Sure you do. You've been Sarah's best friend for 3 years, ever since she started at Henderson Associates. You introduced her to the right people, helped her get promoted, encouraged her to take risks." "I was being supportive." "You were being strategic. See, I've been doing some research on your company, talking to people, learning about office politics and career advancement, and you know what I discovered?" Linda's jaw tightened. "I'm sure you're going to tell me." "Richard Henderson is planning to retire next year. He's been looking for a successor, someone to take over the marketing division, someone ambitious, talented, and completely loyal to him." So? So Sarah was never really in the running for that position. She was just a distraction. A pretty married distraction who could keep Henderson entertained while you positioned yourself as the responsible, professional alternative. Linda's face flushed red. That's ridiculous. Is it? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you played my wife perfectly. Encouraged her to get closer to Henderson, maybe even suggested the Miami trip. And now that she's damaged goods, you're the obvious choice to step into her role. Linda stood up abruptly, knocking over her coffee cup. You're paranoid, Jack. Sarah made her own choices. Yes, she did. But she had help making them. As Linda hurried out of the coffee shop, I realized my revenge had been too narrow in scope. I'd been focused on punishing Sarah and Henderson, but Linda was the puppet master who'd orchestrated the whole thing. Time to expand my target list. That evening, I called Tommy Murphy and asked him to meet me at the gym after hours. When I arrived, I found him in his office, going through paperwork and nursing a beer. You look like a man with a plan, Tommy said, offering me a beer from his mini fridge. I need a favor. Actually, I need several favors. Name it. I told Tommy about Linda's manipulation, about her calculated destruction of Sarah's marriage and career for her own advancement. So, what do you want to do about it? Tommy asked. I want to give her exactly what she gave Sarah: public humiliation, professional destruction, and a lesson about consequences. Tommy grinned. Now you're talking my language. What do you need? Access to Henderson and Associates after hours. A way to get information about Linda's own extracurricular activities. And maybe some help documenting everything for posterity. I know a guy who does security for their building. And my nephew is pretty handy with computers and cameras. When do you want to do this? Tomorrow night. Linda's working late on some big presentation for Henderson. Perfect opportunity to see what she's really up to. The next evening, Tommy and I met his nephew Danny in the parking lot behind Henderson and Associates. Danny was a 20-something tech wizard who made his living doing digital consulting for people who needed information that wasn't freely available. Uncle Tommy says you need some corporate intelligence, Danny said, shouldering a backpack full of electronic equipment. Something like that. We need to know what Linda Prescott has been up to, both professionally and personally. Emails, phone records, financial information, anything that shows her real agenda. Getting into the building was easier than I expected. Tommy's security contact had provided us with key cards and alarm codes, and the night cleaning crew was used to seeing maintenance workers in the building after hours. We made our way up to the marketing department where Linda's office sat dark and empty. Danny immediately went to work on her computer while Tommy and I searched through her files and desk drawers. What we found was even worse than I'd suspected. Linda had been systematically undermining every woman in the marketing department for over 2 years. She'd spread rumors, sabotaged projects, and manipulated office politics to eliminate competition. Sarah wasn't her first victim, just her most recent. But the real smoking gun was in Linda's email correspondence with Henderson. Messages going back months, discussing Sarah's emotional instability and unprofessional behavior. Linda had been feeding Henderson negative information about Sarah while simultaneously encouraging Sarah to pursue a closer relationship with him. Jesus, Tommy muttered, reading over my shoulder. This woman is a piece of work. Danny looked up from the computer. You guys need to see this. She's got a whole folder labeled Succession Planning, with detailed profiles of every woman in the department. Psychological assessments, personal weaknesses, strategies for elimination. Can you copy everything? Already done, but I found something else that's interesting. She's been having an affair too, with Henderson's business partner in Boston, guy named Michael Torres who's been helping her gather information about Henderson's retirement plans. The pieces were falling into place. Linda hadn't just manipulated Sarah for career advancement. She'd been playing a much longer game, positioning herself to take over Henderson's entire operation with help from his business partner. Can you set up a way to broadcast this information publicly? I asked Danny. What did you have in mind? Linda's giving a big presentation to the board of directors next week. Something about the future direction of the marketing department. I think the board should have all the relevant information about her qualifications. Danny grinned. I can definitely arrange that. We spent another hour gathering evidence and setting up Danny's surveillance equipment. By the time we left the building, we had enough documentation to destroy Linda's career and reputation just as thoroughly as she'd destroyed Sarah's. But I wasn't done yet. The next morning, I drove to Henderson's house, a sprawling colonial in the expensive part of town. His car was in the driveway, and I could see him through the kitchen window, drinking coffee and reading the newspaper. I rang the doorbell and waited. Henderson opened the door wearing a bathrobe and a suspicious expression. What do you want, Morrison? To talk, man to man, about the future. He reluctantly let me in, leading me to his kitchen where the morning newspaper was spread across the breakfast table. If you're here to threaten me, I'm here to offer you a deal. Henderson sat down across from me, still wary. What kind of deal? The kind where you get to keep some of your dignity and I get to finish what I started. I told him about Linda's manipulation, about her affair with his business partner, about her plans to push him out of his own company. You're lying, Henderson said, but his voice lacked conviction. I pulled out my phone and showed him some of Danny's photographs. Email exchanges between Linda and Michael Torres discussing Henderson's declining judgment and inappropriate relationships with employees. Henderson's face went gray as he read, That bitch, that calculating bitch. She played all of us, Richard. You, me, Sarah, probably half the women in your company. The question is, what are you going to do about it? What do you suggest? Linda's presentation to the board is next Tuesday. I think they should know exactly what kind of person they're considering for promotion. Henderson was quiet for a long moment, staring at the evidence on my phone. What's in this for you? He finally asked. Justice, and maybe a little bit of revenge. What about Sarah? I shrugged. Sarah made her choices. She'll have to live with the consequences. But at least she was manipulated into making them. Linda knew exactly what she was doing from the beginning. Henderson nodded slowly. What do you need from me? Access to the board meeting, and your cooperation in making sure Linda gets exactly what she deserves. Tuesday morning arrived gray and rainy, matching my mood perfectly. I'd spent the weekend making final preparations, coordinating with Danny and Tommy, and trying to ignore Emma's increasingly hostile attitude toward me. Sarah had been staying at her mother's house since the barbecue incident, coming by only to pick up clothes and mail. She looked terrible, pale, thin, and defeated. Part of me felt sorry for her, but a larger part of me remembered the sound of her giggling on the phone with Henderson. The Henderson Associates board meeting was scheduled for 10 a.m. in their main conference room. Danny had spent the previous evening setting up his equipment, installing hidden cameras and hacking into their presentation system. At 9:45, I was sitting in my truck across the street from their building, watching the board members arrive. Distinguished-looking men and women in expensive suits, the kind of people who made decisions that affected hundreds of lives without ever getting their hands dirty. Linda arrived at 9:50, looking confident and professional in a navy blue suit that probably cost more than I made in a week. She carried herself like someone who was about to achieve a major life goal. She had no idea what was waiting for her upstairs. At exactly 10 a.m., my phone buzzed with a text from Danny. Showtime. Linda began her presentation with a PowerPoint about market trends and revenue projections. She spoke confidently about her vision for the marketing department, her plans for expansion, her commitment to professional excellence. The board members listened politely, taking notes and asking occasional questions. Henderson sat at the head of the table, his expression carefully neutral. 20 minutes into Linda's presentation, Danny made his move. The PowerPoint slides suddenly changed, replaced by photographs of Linda's email correspondence with Michael Torres. The board members looked confused at first, then increasingly alarmed as they realized what they were seeing. "What is this?" demanded the board chairman, a silver-haired man named Robert Walsh. Linda frantically clicked her presentation remote, but the slides kept advancing, showing more and more damaging evidence. Her character assassinations of other employees, her manipulation of office politics, her affair with Torres and their plans to force Henderson into early retirement. "This is some kind of technical malfunction," Linda said, her voice rising in panic. "Someone is sabotaging my presentation." But the board members were reading the evidence, and their expressions were growing darker by the minute. "Ms. Prescott," Walsh said coldly, "these appear to be your email communications with our business partner in Boston. Communications that suggest a pattern of manipulation and corporate espionage. I can explain." "I don't think you can." The presentation continued for another 10 minutes, methodically destroying Linda's reputation and career with her own words and actions. By the time it ended, she was crying, and the board members were furious. "Ms. Prescott," Walsh said, "you're terminated immediately. Security will escort you from the building. We'll be conducting a full investigation into your activities, and we reserve the right to pursue legal action." Linda looked around the room desperately, seeking support that wasn't there. Even Henderson avoided her eyes. "This isn't over," she said, glaring at Henderson. "You have no idea what you've done." But it was over. Security guards appeared at the conference room door, and Linda was escorted out of the building in full view of her former colleagues. I watched from my truck as she emerged onto the sidewalk, carrying a cardboard box of personal items and looking like her world had just collapsed. Because it had. That evening, I was back in my workshop when Emma appeared in the doorway. "I heard what happened to Linda today," she said. "News travels fast in a small town." "Did you do it?" I looked up from the engine I was rebuilding. "Do what?" "Don't play games with me, Dad. Did you destroy Linda's career the same way you destroyed Mom's?" "Linda destroyed her own career. I just made sure the right people found out about it." Emma leaned against the workbench, studying my face. "And you feel good about that?" "I feel like justice was served." "What about Mom? Does she get justice too, or just punishment?" It was a fair question, and I didn't have a good answer for it. "Your mother made her choices, Emma. She chose to have an affair. She chose to lie about it. She chose to put herself and me at risk for a sexually transmitted disease. Those choices have consequences. And you chose to humiliate her publicly instead of handling it privately. That choice has consequences too." Emma was right, of course. My choices had consequences, and one of those consequences was losing my daughter's respect. "I'm not proud of everything I've done," I admitted, "but I'm not sorry either." "Then you're not the man I thought you were." She turned and walked back toward the house, leaving me alone with my tools and my regrets. The next few weeks passed in a blur of legal meetings and paperwork. Sarah filed for divorce, citing irreconcilable differences. I didn't contest it. Henderson announced his early retirement and left town, reportedly moving to Florida to start over. Linda disappeared entirely, though rumors suggested she'd moved back to California where her family lived. The town gossip mill eventually moved on to other scandals, but the damage was permanent. Sarah's reputation never recovered, and she eventually took a job with a company in Boston, commuting 2 hours each way rather than face the daily whispers and stares in Millbrook. Emma graduated high school and announced her intention to attend college as far from home as possible. She blamed me for destroying our family, and maybe she was right. But on a cold October evening, 6 months after the barbecue confrontation that started it all, I got a phone call that changed everything. "Mr. Morrison, this is Detective Sarah Chen with the Boston Police Department. I'm calling about Linda Prescott." "What about her?" "She was arrested yesterday on charges of embezzlement and fraud. During our investigation, we discovered evidence that she'd been running similar schemes at her previous employers. We'd like to talk to you about your experiences with Ms. Prescott. It turned out that Linda's manipulation of Sarah and Henderson was just the latest in a long pattern of corporate sabotage and financial fraud. She'd been systematically destroying careers and stealing money for over a decade, moving from company to company and leaving a trail of victims behind her. The investigation revealed that Linda had stolen over $200,000 from Henderson Associates, money she'd been funneling to offshore accounts through her relationship with Michael Torres, who was also arrested. "Mr. Morrison," Detective Chen said during our phone interview, "your documentation of Ms. Prescott's activities was crucial to building our case. Without your evidence, she might have gotten away with it again." After I hung up the phone, I sat in my workshop thinking about justice and revenge and the difference between them. I'd thought I was just getting back at the people who'd destroyed my marriage, but it turned out I'd helped expose a criminal who'd been destroying lives for years. Maybe Emma was right about my methods being wrong, but the results spoke for themselves. A week later, I got another unexpected phone call. "Jack, it's Sarah." I hadn't heard my ex-wife's voice in months. She sounded different, older, sadder, but also somehow clearer. "I heard about Linda's arrest," she said, "about what she really was. Yeah, I wanted to thank you, and to apologize." "For what?" "For not seeing what she was doing, for letting her manipulate me into destroying our marriage, for being so stupid and selfish that I threw away 20 years for a few months of excitement." I didn't know what to say to that. "I know you'll probably never forgive me," Sarah continued, "and I know I can't undo what I did, but I want you to know that I understand now. What Linda did to me, what she did to both of us. I was a victim, but I was also a willing participant, and I'm sorry." "Sarah, I'm not asking for anything, Jack. I just wanted you to know that I finally understand what really happened, and I wanted to tell you that despite everything, despite how it ended, I don't regret our 20 years together. You were a good husband, and I was a fool to throw that away." She hung up before I could respond. That night, I called Emma at college. "Dad?" She sounded surprised to hear from me. We'd barely spoken since she left for school. "I wanted to tell you about Linda's arrest," I said. I explained everything, the embezzlement, the fraud, the pattern of manipulation that went back years. "So you were right about her," Emma said when I finished. "I was right about what she did. I'm not sure I was right about how I handled it." Emma was quiet for a moment. "Are you apologizing?" "I'm trying to. To me or to Mom. To both of you. To everyone I hurt while I was trying to hurt the people who hurt me. Dad, what Linda did doesn't excuse what Mom did, and what Mom did doesn't excuse what you did. I know. But maybe we can all learn from it. Maybe we can all try to be better." It wasn't forgiveness, exactly, but it was a start. 6 months later, I was closing up the workshop when a car pulled into my driveway. Emma got out, followed by a young man I didn't recognize. "Dad, I want you to meet David," Emma said. "My boyfriend." David was a polite kid, maybe 21, with an honest handshake and nervous eyes. He clearly knew the story of our family's destruction and wasn't sure what to expect from me. "Nice to meet you, sir," he said. "Likewise. Emma, you look good." She did. College had been good for her. She looked healthier, happier, more confident than she had in years. "We're just passing through on our way to Boston," Emma said. "I wanted to see how you were doing." "I'm fine, working a lot, keeping busy." "Dating anyone?" I laughed. Not exactly a hot commodity these days. Divorced, middle-aged electrician with a reputation for public revenge schemes. "You might be surprised," Emma said. "Mrs. Chen from the hardware store asked about you last week when I stopped by. Mrs. Chen is 70 years old. Her daughter isn't." It was good to see Emma smile, even if she was teasing me. We had dinner at the local diner, and for the first time in over a year, I felt like I might have a family again. Not the same family, not the same relationships, but something worth rebuilding. As they were leaving, Emma hugged me goodbye. "I'm proud of you, Dad," she said quietly. "For what?" "For stopping. For not letting the anger consume you completely. For trying to make things right." After they drove away, I sat on my front porch watching the sun set over Millbrook. The town looked the same as it always had, but everything felt different. Sarah was building a new life in Boston. Linda was in prison. Henderson was gone. Emma was growing up and moving on, and I was learning to live with the consequences of my choices, both good and bad. The next morning, I got a call from a potential client, a woman whose husband had been cheating on her, who'd heard about my reputation for handling unfaithful spouses. "I want him to pay," she said. "I want him to suffer the way he made me suffer." I listened to her story, the lies, the betrayal, the humiliation. It was familiar territory. "Ma'am," I said when she finished, "I understand your anger. I understand wanting revenge. But before you go down that road, let me ask you something. What do you want your life to look like when this is over?" She was quiet for a moment. "I want him to hurt the way I hurt." "And then what? After he hurts, after he's humiliated, after his life is destroyed? Then what? Will you feel better? Will your life be better? Or will you just be someone who destroys lives?" I don't know. Take some time to think about it. Revenge feels good in the moment, but you have to live with yourself afterward, and sometimes the person you become in pursuit of revenge isn't someone you want to be. I gave her the number for a good divorce attorney and a therapist who specialized in infidelity recovery. Then I went back to work, fixing electrical problems that had clear solutions and predictable outcomes. Because sometimes the best revenge is simply refusing to let someone else's betrayal turn you into someone you don't recognize. Sometimes the best revenge is choosing to be better than the people who hurt you. And sometimes the best revenge is no revenge at all.